Hey guys, tonight we are going to climb aboard a creaky Roman cargo ship bound for distant ports, bobbing across the deep blue of the Mediterranean around the year 100 CE. You will stand barefoot on its planks, feeling the sun beat down as the salty wind tugs at your tunic. You will hear the groan of ropes, the slap of sails, and the shouted Latin of the busy crew. And yes, while you may start this voyage dreaming of plump grapes and platters of roasted meats, I regret to inform you that shipboard meals are, well, considerably less glamorous. You probably will not survive this on a modern palate alone. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, post your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where my listeners are drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully along the gangplank of a ship called Fortuna's Grace, docked at the bustling Roman port of Ostia. The year is 100 CE, during the rule of Emperor Trajan. The Mediterranean is Rome's watery highway, linking its empire together, and cargo ships, novus honorariae, like this one, are the lifeblood of that trade. You glance around, barrels of wine, olive oil amphorae stacked like honeycomb, sacks of grain, dried fruit in baskets, garlands of garlic, and onions swinging gently from the beams. You follow the captain's booming voice, catching snippets about winds, tides, and do not drop that crate of Syrian dates again. This is no luxury vessel. It is a working ship, crewed by about 20 rough-edged men, hired to ferry precious goods across treacherous seas. And what about food? Surely, you wonder, there must be something hearty to feed these sailors on such long voyages. Well, brace yourself. First, supplies. The ship is stocked according to tradition and experience. There is a rough formula to provisioning: grain to grind into pulls, barrels of wine to drink, hardtack for emergencies, dried legumes, salted meat or fish, garlic, onions, olives, dried fruits, honey, and most important, plenty of garum, that famous Roman fermented fish sauce that somehow manages to smell worse than it tastes. Historians still argue whether ships carry live animals for meat. Some records suggest small flocks of chickens or goats, while others believe space was too precious. On this voyage, no bleating or clucking reaches your ears. If meat appears, it will likely be salted or smoked. As you gaze across the dock, you spot the galley slaves loading a curious object, a portable clay stove called a foculus. There is no permanent kitchen on board. Open flames and wooden ships are not a wise mix. Instead, cooking is done cautiously in sheltered spots when the sea is calm. Soon, the last cargo is secured. Sailors chant in rhythm as they hoist the sails. You feel a thrill and a flicker of worry as the ship creaks away from the dock and Ostia fades behind you. By the first evening, you notice the ship's rhythm. The crew works in shifts. The air smells of tar and brine, and everyone is already eyeing the food stores with a practiced gaze. The captain eats separately. He has finer provisions, and, rumor has it, even a jar of expensive pickled fish from Hispania. You, however, are with the common sailors. Dinner is called, not with bells, but with shouted words. You sit cross-legged with the others on the deck. One sailor pulls out flat, hard bread. Another ladles steaming pools from a pot balanced precariously on the foculus. It is thick, grayish, and vaguely smells of grains and garlic. You scoop some into a wooden bowl and tear your bread to dip into it. Around you, men drizzle garum into their portions, the smell sharp enough to make your eyes water. You hesitate, then try a cautious bite. The taste? Oddly rich and umami, though the smell still lingers unpleasantly in your nose. There is a jug of watered wine passed around, for pure water is a risky gamble. Amphorae of drinking water are aboard, but as journeys stretch on, the water can turn foul. Mixing it with wine kills some bacteria, or so the Romans believe. Whether this works well or not, let us just say you sip carefully. The sailor grins at your cautious sips and slaps your back. First timer, eh? He says. Drink more. You will need it when the sea turns rough. As the stars will above, your ship sails steadily. Crates creak, ropes groan, and the faint laughter of the crew drifts in the air. You feel full, not exactly satisfied, but no longer hungry. The meal is simple, repetitive, and functional. Variety is rare, food must last. In the distance, dolphins leap beside the ship, silver in the moonlight. A sailor tosses a few crumbs of bread overboard and murmurs a short prayer. You ask why. A gift for Neptune, he says. Better to stay on his good side. You settle against a coil of rope, your stomach heavy with pulls and watered wine. The ship creaks onward through the darkness, and as sleep claims you, you wonder, what will tomorrow's meal bring? Morning comes early aboard Fortuna's Grace. You wake to the shrill cry of gulls and the gentle thump of feet on the deck. Your bones protest against the hard planks. You are not used to sleeping under open skies, with only a thin blanket to shield you from the chill. Around you, sailors are already bustling, checking ropes and inspecting the rigging. The sea stretches out endlessly, deep blue and faintly shimmering under the rising sun, and your stomach rumbles. Time for breakfast, such as it is. You shuffle toward the makeshift galley. There is no true kitchen here. Instead, a small area near the stern has been cleared for food preparation. The crew calls it the kitchen with a grin, but it is more a collection of battered pots and the precious foculus stove, shielded from the wind by wooden boards. The air here always smells faintly of ash and garum. One of the galley slaves, a wiry Greek named Diodorus, tends the foculus. He fans the embers to life with quick, practiced movements. Sparks rise briefly before settling. He is in charge of the ship's humble meals, a role both envied and pitied. If a dish pleases the captain, Diodorus gets an extra ration of wine. If it displeases, well, sailors have long memories. You lean in, curious. Diodorus grins, revealing crooked teeth. Hungry already? Here, watch. You might learn something. He gestures to a rough stone mortar. Inside, Olives are being crushed into a paste. Nearby, chunks of hard bread, Panis nauticus, are soaking in seawater and vinegar to soften. This bread, baked rock hard for storage, would shatter your teeth if eaten dry. The soaking does not make it delicious, but at least chewable. You glance at the other sailors. They sit in small groups, bowls in hand, chatting in a mix of Latin and various dialects from across the empire. You realize something. On this ship, language and food bind the crew together. These men come from all over Italy, Hispania, Africa Proconsularis, even Syria. And yet here they are, sharing the same humble meal. Diodorus hands you a bowl. Inside is a mash of softened bread, olive paste, and a drizzle of garum. Eat, he says. Keeps you strong. You take a bite. The bread is sour, the olives bitter and oily, the garum pungent as ever. It is not exactly a feast, but it fills your stomach. Around you, the crew munches in companionable silence. Some sprinkle dried herbs atop their bowls. Others chew raw garlic cloves, a habit they believe wards off illness. Historians still argue whether garlic truly helped prevent diseases like scurvy, or if it was merely superstition. As you eat, you notice Diodorus preparing a second pot. He stirs a thick porridge of poles, this time flavored with bits of dried fig and a handful of sesame seeds. This variation is considered a treat, usually reserved for calmer days when the sea allows for more elaborate cooking. A grizzled sailor named Gaius plops down beside you. You will miss this when the storms come, he says, jerking his thumb at the pot. Then it is hard bread and cold water for days. He pulls a small pouch from his belt and offers you a pinch of spice, ground coriander, and cumin. A little of this helps, he winks. Keeps the belly happy. You sprinkle some over your porridge. The effect is subtle, but welcome. In a world of bland shipboard fare, even a whisper of spice feels luxurious. As the crew finishes eating, the empty bowls are rinsed in seawater, a practice that both cleans and, unfortunately, adds a faint salty tang to everything. Diodorus begins preparing a new batch of poles for the midday meal. The foculus must be tended constantly. Its embers are precious, and relighting it on a rolling ship is no easy task. You wander the deck as the sailors resume their work. One repairs a frayed rope. Another checks the amphorae in the hold, ensuring none have cracked. The captain stands near the stern, scanning the horizon. You overhear a conversation between two younger sailors. They are debating which region produces the best olive oil, Baetica in Hispania or Campania in Italy. The argument grows heated with much gesturing and laughter. Clearly, even aboard a ship far from home, culinary pride runs deep. Suddenly, a commotion, a loud thump from the hold, followed by shouting. You rush to see a barrel of wine has split, its precious contents leaking across the planks. The crew scrambles to salvage what they can. Wine is not just for drinking. It is also used for preserving certain foods and masking the taste of water gone bad. Later, as calm returns, the sailors gather again. Some sip watered wine from shared cups. Others gnaw on dried figs or nibble on garlicky sausage. another preserved staple that holds up well at sea. You are offered a slice. It is tough, smoky, and rich with fat, a welcome change from the morning's mash. A sailor named Lucius leans over and whispers conspiratorially, "You know, some say a good cook is worth more than gold out here. A bad one? He might find himself swimming." You laugh, but there is a glint in his eye that makes you wonder. By mid-morning, the sun climbs higher, the ship rocks gently, and a steady wind fills the sails. The day stretches ahead, work, watch shifts, and another round of pulls when noon comes. As you return to your place on the deck, your mind drifts to land, fresh bread, ripe fruit, roasted meats. But here, on Fortuna's grace, your meals will be simpler, shaped by tradition, necessity, and the whims of the sea. You wake to the rhythmic slap of waves and the chatter of the crew. The sun is already blazing overhead, and the Mediterranean sparkles endlessly in every direction. The ship rocks gently as it plows onward, sails full. You rub your eyes, stretch, and follow the scent of wood smoke wafting from the bow. There, in a sheltered corner of the deck, you find the ship's makeshift kitchen in full swing. Do not imagine gleaming pots and tidy stoves. This is a rough, practical setup born of necessity. A low brazier squats within a protective clay shield, surrounded by iron tools and soot-blackened pots. An old sailor named Rufus tends the fire, grumbling about the damp wood. Sparks pop as he stirs a pot with a carved wooden spoon. The kitchen, or culina, as the Romans would say, is cobbled together every time the sea allows. On rough days, cooking is abandoned entirely, and sailors rely on cold fare. But today, Fortuna smiles. The waters are calm enough for Rufus to work his magic. You crouch nearby, watching. In the pot, pulse thickens again, this time flecked with dried herbs. Rufus adds a generous splash of olive oil, retrieved from one of the many amphorae lining the ship. "Best from Baetica," he mutters, referring to the fertile Roman province in Hispania. Whether it truly is the best remains a hot topic among the crew. Historians still argue whether olive oil preferences were regional pride or genuine culinary differences. Another sailor, young Cassius, arrives carrying a basket of olives. He plucks one, pops it into his mouth, and winks at you. "Keeps the scurvy away," he jokes. Not entirely wrong, though vitamin C science is centuries off. The olives, glossy and wrinkled, are a staple here. They store well, provide fat and flavor, and are endlessly versatile. Nearby, the ship's stores reveal a fascinating array of preserved foods. Dried figs and dates are strung up in bundles. Garlands of garlic sway with the ship's motion. Salted fish lies stacked in wooden crates, the salt crusted thick around each fillet. You can practically taste the briny tang just standing there. Rufus ladles pulls into simple wooden bowls, handing them to the waiting sailors. He sets aside a smaller, finer portion for the captain, a quiet acknowledgement of shipboard hierarchy. The captain eats better, with access to rarer delicacies like cheese, imported olives, or even a bit of honey if supplies permit. You accept a bowl of your own, The pulse is warm, hearty, and improved by the herbaceous kick of dried oregano and thyme. A drizzle of that prized olive oil makes it richer still. Beside you, Cassius tears off a chunk of ship's bread, hard and dense, baked to survive the voyage. He soaks it in wine, softening it enough to chew. You follow suit, discovering that while the wine is rough, it is preferable to gnawing dry brick. As you eat, the kitchen hums with quiet camaraderie. Jokes fly, some of them surprisingly bawdy, and debates arise over trivial matters. Which olive oil is superior? Is Gaulish garlic stronger than Sicilian? Could the Greek merchant ship they passed yesterday really carry a better garum? One sailor insists that alec, the chunky byproduct of garum making, is the true prize, perfect for flavoring pulls. Another scoffs, claiming only the clear, amber liquid counts. Historians still argue whether garum or alec was more prized among common folk. Amid this culinary chatter, practical concerns remain. Water is rationed carefully. A cooper checks the seals on the water amphory, making sure none leak or spoil. Every drop counts, especially if storms delay the voyage. To stretch the supply, watered wine remains the daily drink, a blend known as Posca when soured, which many sailors actually prefer. You sip some and find it tart, but refreshing. Later in the day, Rufus prepares a treat: dried apricots stewed in wine with a drizzle of honey. Such sweet luxuries are rare at sea. The sailors crowd around eagerly. You taste your portion, a burst of tart sweet flavor that briefly transports you from this wooden world. The kitchen's rhythm reflects life on board, repetitive but sustaining. Meals are functional, designed to nourish and conserve supplies. The same staples appear day after day: pulls, olives, ship's bread, salted fish, the occasional dried fruit. Yet within these limits, sailors improvise, flavoring with herbs, adding garum, or soaking bread in wine. As the sun dips toward the horizon, Rufus extinguishes the brazier, muttering about saving fuel. The ship sails on, the air cooling. Tonight, cold fare will suffice: hard bread, olives, and a splash of wine under the stars. You settle on the deck, full, but already wondering what tomorrow's galley concoction will bring. The sea whispers around you, the stars will overhead, and Fortuna's grace creaks softly into the night. You are already growing accustomed to the rhythms of life aboard Fortuna's Grace. Days blur into each other: sky, sea, wind, work, rest, and, of course, meals. Always the meals. You quickly learn that hunger dulls expectations. What seems plain one day becomes welcome the next. This morning, as the sun edges past the horizon, Diodorus is already at work by the little Foculus. The smell of roasting garlic drifts through the air, mixing with the scent of tar and salt. Around him, a few sailors groggily stretch and rub their eyes. Breakfast is not a leisurely affair. It is fuel for the hard labor to come. You join the queue and receive your portion: a coarse loaf of Panis Nauticus, an olive or two, and yes, again, a small wooden spoonful of garum. The bread is dense, baked twice for durability. Think of it as an ancient Roman hardtack. You can bang it against the deck, and it will not break. To eat it, you soak it in a mixture of wine and water, or vinegar if you are feeling bold. Garum is the true star of the table, if one can call it that. Made from fermented fish guts and salt, it is prized across the empire for its savory punch. Sailors use it liberally to disguise the blandness of their food. You drizzle some over your softened bread and take a tentative bite. Salty, fishy, strangely addictive. Olives are a welcome treat, brined and firm. They offer a burst of flavor in an otherwise monotonous meal. Some sailors bring their own stash of pickled vegetables or dried fruit to liven up the fare. A Syrian sailor proudly offers you a sliver of dried apricot, sweet and tangy. It is a rare delight. As you chew, conversation buzzes around you. One sailor boasts of the garum factories in Hispania, where the sauce is said to reach perfection. Another claims that the best garum comes from the shores of Dalmatia. Historians still argue whether certain regions truly produced superior garum, or if this was just regional pride. What is clear is that garum was ubiquitous. No Roman kitchen or ship left port without it. Water, as always, is a concern. The ship carries several amphorae of fresh water, but they are carefully rationed. As the voyage progresses, the water will grow stale, developing a slimy texture and unpleasant odor. To cope, sailors mix it with wine, not out of luxury, but survival. Wine's alcohol content helps mask the taste and, perhaps, stave off illness. You sip from a shared cup of watered wine. It is thin, sour, and barely resembles what you might imagine Roman wine to be. The best vintages do not make it aboard cargo ships. What you are drinking is likely Posca, a rough blend of cheap wine, vinegar, and water favored by soldiers and sailors alike. It refreshes and hydrates, sort of. Midway through your meal, a sailor named Rufus pulls out a small clay jar. Inside is a paste of ground almonds and honey. He offers you a taste on the tip of his knife. The sweetness is a shock after so much salt and sour. You close your eyes and savor it, letting the flavor linger. Rufus grins, brought it from Alexandria. Rare treat. You thank him, realizing that such moments of generosity help knit the crew together. On long voyages, food is not just sustenance. It is comfort, memory, and connection. The sun climbs higher, and work resumes. You join the crew in hauling ropes and adjusting sails. The sea is calm, the ship steady. Around mid-morning, a sailor tosses a piece of bread overboard and mutters a quick prayer. You remember this from your first night, an offering to Neptune. Some sailors add drops of wine or bits of fruit. Historians still argue whether these rituals had official sanction or were purely sailor superstition. On Fortuna's grace, they are taken seriously. As noon approaches, Diodorus prepares pools again, this time with a handful of lentils thrown in. The ship's cook works with what he has, varying the porridge as supplies allow. Some days it is thinner, almost a gruel. Other days, thicker and studded with bits of dried meat or vegetables. You gather with the crew for the midday meal. The pulse is earthy and satisfying, the lentils adding texture and depth. You sprinkle a few crushed herbs over your bowl, thyme and oregano from a small pouch gifted by an old sailor. Between mouthfuls, stories flow. One sailor recounts a stormy voyage where the Pole's pot overturned, leaving the crew to chew raw grain for days. Another swears that the best ship's cook he ever knew could make poles taste like ambrosia. You smile, knowing that here, culinary expectations are modest. After the meal, there is a brief respite. Some sailors nap in the shade of the sail, others mend clothing or polish weapons. You watch the sea, marveling at its vastness. There is no land in sight, only the endless dance of sun and waves. As the afternoon wears on, a commotion erupts near the bow. A fisherman among the crew has caught a small tuna. Cheers echo across the deck. Fresh fish is a rare prize. Diodorus quickly cleans it, saving the head and bones for broth and filleting the rest. Tonight's meal will be special. You cannot help but feel a flicker of excitement. Even a small change in the menu is cause for celebration. On a Roman cargo ship, what people ate was shaped by the sea, the stores, and sheer luck. And tonight, luck has favored Fortuna's grace. The crew buzzes with anticipation. Word has spread quickly. Fresh fish tonight. You feel it too, that small surge of joy. Anything different is a gift. The day passes with the usual routines, hauling ropes, checking cargo, adjusting the sails as the wind shifts. But always, your thoughts drift back to the tuna cooling in a bucket of seawater. As the sun begins to sink, Diodorus reappears at his little galley setup, sleeves rolled up and eyes bright. Cooking fish aboard a ship is tricky. There is always the danger of fire, and the precious fuel must be used wisely. But the sea is calm, and the captain has given his blessing. The cook gets to work. You watch, fascinated. First, Diodorus prepares a broth using the tuna head and bones. Into a battered pot goes seawater, a splash of wine, handfuls of garlic and onions, a sprig of dried thyme, and a few peppercorns, precious cargo from the east. Historians still argue whether such exotic spices were common among sailors or reserved for officers. But on Fortuna's grace, a little pepper has found its way into the pot. While the broth simmers, Diodorus fillets the fish. The flesh is pale pink, glistening in the fading light. He sets aside the choicest pieces for the captain and officers. Rank has its privileges even at sea. The rest he cuts into chunks, ready to stew. Sailors begin to gather, bowls and cups in hand, eyes gleaming. Food unites this rough band of men like nothing else. There are no feast days out here, no public games, no grand banquets. A simple bowl of fish stew is cause for a shipboard festival. You take your place among them, feeling the communal thrill. The galley hums with energy. Someone strums a crude lyre. Another hums a sea shanty. The mood is light. Even the gruffest sailors crack smiles. Finally, the stew is ready. Diodorus ladles it out carefully. No second helpings until all have been served. You cradle your wooden bowl, breathing in the rich aroma. The broth is cloudy and fragrant, steam rising into the cool evening air. You take your first sip. The flavors burst across your tongue, salty, garlicky, with the deep umami of the sea. Chunks of tender fish melt in your mouth. The pepper adds a subtle heat. It is, without question, the best meal you have had since boarding. Around you, the crew eats with gusto. There is laughter, toasts of watered wine, and exaggerated praise for Diodorus, who accepts it all with a rare grin. For a few precious moments, life aboard Fortuna's Grace feels almost luxurious. Midway through your meal, Lucius leans over. "You know," he says, "some say the Greeks taught us how to cook fish this way. Others claim it is an old Etruscan trick. Historians still argue about it." He winks. "Either way, I say let them argue. I am eating." You laugh and continue eating. The sailors around you begin swapping stories of their favorite meals from home. One speaks of wild boar roasted over a pit fire in Gaul. Another describes honey cakes from Alexandria. Yet another, a grizzled veteran, sighs and murmurs, "Nothing beats my mother's lentil soup." It is a soft, wistful moment amid the rough sea chatter. As the bowls empty, sailors linger, savoring the warmth. A few share dried figs and dates from their personal stores, passing them around. You bite into a date, sticky, sweet, and rich with concentrated flavor. For a moment, it blots out the salt and sea. The sun has now dipped below the horizon. Stars begin to prick the sky, and a cool breeze sweeps across the deck. The ship creaks softly as it glides onward. The meal may be over, but the camaraderie lingers. Some sailors linger in small circles, singing or dicing by lantern light. Before turning in, you watch Diodorus clean up. The broth pot is scraped, the embers banked carefully to save fuel. Every scrap of food is either eaten or stored. Nothing wasted on a ship where supplies must last. You lie back on the deck, stomach full, listening to the soft murmurs of the crew. The sea rocks you gently, and as you drift toward sleep, you think about the strange magic of food, a simple fish stew turning a long, weary day into one of the voyage's most memorable moments. Tomorrow will bring the usual pulls and hard bread again, no doubt. But tonight, you will dream of garlic-scented broth and tender tuna, a fleeting taste of comfort on the wide, endless sea. Morning breaks with a cool breeze and clear skies, a welcome omen. You wake to the familiar sounds of ship life, ropes creaking, gulls crying, sailors calling out greetings in a dozen accents. Your joints are stiff from another night on the hard deck, but your mind is already on one thing: breakfast. You shuffle over to the galley, where Diodorus is back at it, fanning embers and chopping dried herbs. Today, he is preparing a thicker pulse, fortified with barley. The grain has soaked overnight, swelling and softening, a simple trick that helps stretch supplies and make meals more filling. A sailor beside you grins. Good day for barley. Keeps you strong. You nod and watch as Diodorus adds a generous splash of olive oil and a pinch of salt to the pot. The barley pulse begins to bubble, releasing a warm, nutty aroma. Hunger tugs at your belly. While you wait, your eyes wander over the ship's stores. Rows of amphorae lashed securely in the hold, sacks of grain stacked high, bundles of dried herbs hanging from beams. It is a floating pantry, carefully managed to keep the crew fed for weeks. Amphorae of oil and wine come from across the empire. Some are marked with the seal of Baetica, others from Campania, or even Africa Proconsularis. Historians still argue whether certain provinces truly produced the best oils and wines. But aboard Fortuna's Grace, sailors happily debate the matter at every meal. The wine, of course, is watered down before serving. Strong wine is for land feasts and wealthy merchants. Here, it is stretched to last, creating the familiar Pascha. This morning's batch tastes a bit rough. Perhaps the barrel is starting to sour. You sip it anyway. The slight vinegar tang is oddly refreshing after a night of dry sea air. Diodorus serves the barley poles with a garnish of crushed coriander and a drizzle of garum. You take your bowl and find a spot on the deck. The first spoonful is hearty and satisfying. The barley gives it a pleasant chewiness, and the garum adds its usual salty punch. Around you, the crew eats in companionable silence. A few sailors chatter about the day's work. One is sewing a tear in a sail. Another sharpens a knife. Breakfast is a quick affair, fuel for labor, not a leisurely ritual. Suddenly, a shout from the lookout interrupts the calm. Dolphins off the port bow. You and the others scramble to the rail, bowls still in hand. Sure enough, a pod of sleek dolphins leaps and dives alongside the ship. Cheers erupt from the crew. Sailors take it as a good omen. Dolphins mean calm, seas ahead. Lucius grins at you. Neptune's blessing, he says. We will eat well today. Whether he truly believes it or is just in a good mood, you cannot tell. Historians still argue whether Roman sailors were deeply superstitious or simply playful about these sea rituals. The moment passes, and the crew returns to their tasks. You finish your poles, scraping the bowl clean. Hunger on a ship makes even the simplest fare taste precious. Later in the morning, a small surprise arrives. A crate of fresh vegetables, gifted by a passing fishing boat, encountered the day before. The captain allows Diodorus to use some in the next meal, a rare luxury. He sorts through the bounty, onions, leeks, and a handful of celery stalks. As noon approaches, Diodorus prepares a vegetable stew. He sautés the onions and leeks in olive oil, their aroma filling the air. Chunks of bread are set aside to thicken the broth. Sailors gather early, eager for something green. You receive your portion and dig in. The stew is simple but vibrant. The vegetables a welcome change from dried fare. You savor each bite, grateful for the fleeting taste of freshness. As you eat, the crew discusses the ship's next port of call, Crete. Some are excited. Others grumble about the long days still ahead. A few joke about the island's famed wine and women. You smile, letting the chatter wash over you. The captain joins the meal today, a rare sight among the common sailors. His bowl is slightly larger, his portion richer, yet he eats among the crew without airs, perhaps sensing that morale is as vital as wind and sail. After the meal, A sailor named Marcus shares a pouch of dried mulberries. He passes them around, and you accept a small handful. The berries are tart and chewy, a tiny luxury that brightens the afternoon. As the ship sails on, you reflect on the adaptability of the ship's kitchen. With so few tools, a brazier, a pot, a knife, a wooden spoon, Diodorus manages to feed dozens of hungry men day after day. It is a lesson in resilience and resourcefulness. The sun begins to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Another day is ending aboard Fortuna's Grace. You lean against the rail, watching the dolphins return for one final dance. The sea is a vast, indifferent place, but tonight you feel a little less alone upon it. The next morning greets you with a stubborn chill. The sun rises, but a brisk wind keeps the deck cool. You wrap your cloak tighter and make your way to the galley. Diodorus is already awake, rubbing his hands before the small brazier, muttering about the cold. Breakfast today will be different. He is making flatbreads. The dough was prepared last night. A simple mix of grain flour, water, and a bit of oil, kneaded by hand. The rough batter has been resting in a cloth-covered bowl, tucked near the galley for warmth. Now Diodorus rolls it into thin discs and slaps them onto a flat iron griddle set over the embers. The aroma is immediate, earthy, warm, inviting. You and a few sailors watch, eager. The flatbreads puff slightly, their edges browning and crisping. When done, they are stacked high, ready for the morning meal. Flatbreads are a sailor's favorite. They break the monotony of poles and ship's bread, offering something fresh and soft. They also pair perfectly with the many preserved foods aboard. You receive your portion, 2 flatbreads, a small dish of olive paste, and a few olives. It is a light meal, but satisfying. You tear a piece of bread, smear it with the salty paste, and take a bite. The flavors burst across your tongue, simple, bold, delicious. Nearby, sailors are doing the same, chatting softly. One older man claims he once had flatbreads made with honey and sesame seeds in Alexandria. Another scoffs. Too fancy for the likes of us, he says, though his eyes gleam at the thought. Historians still argue whether such sweet breads were common fare for Roman sailors or reserved for the wealthy. On Fortuna's Grace, practicality wins. Flatbreads here are plain but hearty. As you eat, a young sailor named Gaius shares a small wedge of hard cheese from his personal stash. It is sharp and crumbly, likely a sheep's milk cheese from the mountains of Hispania. You gratefully accept a sliver, adding it to your flatbread. The combination is perfect. Meals on this ship are as much about community as sustenance. Sharing food strengthens bonds. Small gestures, offering a bite of cheese, passing a fig, build trust among men who must rely on each other through storms and danger. After breakfast, the crew sets to work. You help hoist sails and secure cargo. The ship makes steady progress under a crisp, cloudless sky. Mid-morning brings a welcome diversion: fishing. Lines are cast over the side, weighted with bits of salted fish. Sailors cluster near the rail, hopeful. Fishing is both sport and necessity. A fresh catch means a break from the routine. Hours pass with little luck. Then, near midday, a shout, "Fish on!" A young sailor hauls up a wriggling sea bass, its scales shimmering silver. Cheers erupt. Soon more fish follow, small, but enough for a meal. Diodorus prepares the catch with practiced ease. He cleans the fish, rubs them with oil and herbs, and wraps them in sheets of fig leaves. The packets are tucked into the embers, roasting slowly. As the scent of roasting fish fills the air, anticipation builds. The fig leaves impart a subtle sweetness, protecting the delicate flesh from burning. You are given one of the first packets, the leaf charred at the edges. You unwrap it carefully. The fish within is tender and fragrant, infused with the essence of herbs and smoke. You eat slowly, savoring each bite. It is one of the finest meals yet. Around you, the crew eats in high spirits. Fresh fish is a rare treat, celebrated with smiles and toasts. Even the captain joins the feast, raising his cup of pasca in salute. One sailor leans over and whispers, "Did you know? Some say sailors used to carry tiny amphorae of fish sauce just for these moments." He grins. Historians still argue whether that is true, but it makes a good story. As the meal winds down, a small cask of dried plums is brought out. The fruit is tart and chewy, a fitting end to the feast. You pop one into your mouth, letting the flavor linger. Later, as the sun dips low, you find a quiet spot on deck. The sea stretches endless and serene. Today's meals, flatbreads, cheese, fresh fish, have lifted the crew's spirits. You feel it too, a renewed energy, a sense of shared purpose. As stars begin to prick the night sky, you close your eyes, the taste of roasted fish still lingering. Tomorrow will bring another day, another meal. But for now, you are content, a sailor among sailors, well fed upon the open sea. Dawn breaks pale and cool. You blink awake, cocooned in your cloak, and listen. The creak of timbers, the snap of canvas, the soft thrum of waves beneath the hull. Another day at sea. You stretch your stiff limbs and make your way toward the galley. Diodorus greets you with a nod, already busy. Today, he is preparing one of the ship's fallback staples, dried lentils. They cook quickly, store well, and provide much needed protein. The pot bubbles quietly, lentils simmering with garlic, onion, and a splash of vinegar for brightness. The smell is earthy, comforting. Sailors gather with their bowls, murmuring about the coming weather. A bank of clouds looms on the horizon, not yet a storm, but perhaps a warning. You take your portion and settle in. The lentils are simple but hearty. You scoop them up with a crust of bread, each bite warm against the morning chill. It is not a meal for celebration, but for endurance. Nearby, an older sailor named Paulus recounts a story of Roman legions marching on lentils alone for weeks. Kept them strong, he says, thumping his chest. Not fancy, but it works. Historians still argue whether such tales are exaggerated, but you believe it after a few days aboard this ship. Mid-morning brings a change in the air. The wind stiffens. The sea grows choppy. Orders fly. Secure the cargo. Reef the sails. You throw yourself into the work, ropes burning your hands, muscles straining. By midday, the sky darkens. Rain lashes the deck. Waves slap the hull. The ship rides it well, but the mood shifts. Meals are hastily prepared and eaten in sheltered corners. Diodorus ladles out steaming bowls of barley pulls thickened with crushed lentils, a double dose of endurance food. You huddle with the others, sharing warmth and shelter. The pulse is bland, but every spoonful fortifies you against the cold. As the storm rages, you reflect on the resilience of this crew. They face the sea with grit and stubborn cheer, their meals a constant anchor. The familiar flavors, lentils, barley, garum, ground you amid the turmoil. By nightfall, the storm begins to ease. Exhausted, you slump against a beam, damp and weary. A sailor offers you a strip of salted pork, and you accept gratefully. The meat is tough, but its fat restores some strength. Salted pork is a prized staple aboard Roman ships. Heavily cured with salt and sometimes smoke, it lasts for weeks. Sailors slice it thin, eat it as is, or add it to stews. It is not tender, but it is rich in calories. Lucius joins you, chewing on his own strip. They say the best salt pork comes from the ports of Brundisium, he says. Historians still argue about it, of course. You grin, the familiar refrain now a running joke. As the sea calms, Diodorus prepares a small pot of hot wine, spiced with cinnamon and honey, a rare luxury kept for nights like this. You sip slowly, the warmth spreading through your chilled body. The crew gathers, sharing quiet conversation. Storms remind you all of the sea's power and the importance of simple comforts. A hot drink, a strip of pork, a shared smile. These small things matter most. Before turning in, you glance at the galley stores. The supply of lentils and barley remains strong. The pork will last another fortnight, if rationed carefully. The cook's ledger hangs nearby, inks in a steady hand. Every sack and amphora accounted for. Historians still argue whether such meticulous record-keeping was common on merchant ships or a mark of particularly diligent captains. On Fortuna's Grace, it seems essential, order against chaos. You drift to sleep with the taste of spiced wine lingering, the storm's memory fading. Tomorrow will bring another day, another meal, and you are learning that survival at sea depends as much on what you eat as how you sail. Morning dawns come, as if the storm never was. You wake with the sun warming your face and the gentle sway of Fortuna's Grace beneath you. The deck is slick with sea spray, but the crew moves with renewed energy. A night survived always brings fresh resolve. You wander to the galley, drawn by the scent of simmering beans. Diodorus has soaked fava beans overnight, one of the ship's most dependable staples. Now he is cooking them down with olive oil, garlic, and a handful of dried mint. You take your bowl with gratitude. The beans are soft and rich, the mint lending a bright note. You scoop them up with hard bread, soaking in the savory oil. Around you, sailors eat quickly, eager to return to work. Fava beans may not excite the palate, but they are a nutritional powerhouse: protein, fiber, and much needed calories. Roman sailors knew their value well. One sailor jokes, "Beans make us strong and dangerous to the man behind us." You chuckle. Some jokes never change. As you eat, a familiar rhythm returns to ship life. Repairs are made to lines frayed by the storm. The sails are inspected and reset. You lend a hand, your body still aching from the previous day's labor. By late morning, the sun shines bright, and the sea sparkles invitingly. Spirits lift. Diodorus decides to prepare something special for the midday meal: a barley and date porridge. He crushes dried dates into a paste, mixing them with barley cooked to a creamy consistency. The result is a sweet, hearty dish, comfort in a bowl. You savor each bite, the natural sugars of the dates a welcome treat. Historians still argue whether such dishes were common among sailors or a rare indulgence, but no one here questions its value today. During the meal, a debate arises over the ship's wine supply. Some claim a new amphora from Crete tastes superior to the older stock. Lucius, ever the amateur connoisseur, declares wine from Crete is like a siren's song, sweet at first, but treacherous. Laughter follows, though you suspect he is not entirely joking. After the meal, the captain orders a short pause. The crew lowers buckets to wash the deck and themselves, a rare opportunity for cleanliness. You take your turn, the cold sea water shocking, but invigorating. Freshened, you return to the galley where Diodorus is already planning the evening meal. He has pulled out a bundle of dried herbs, thyme, oregano, and savory, and a small pouch of farro grain. Farro, an ancient wheat, is a favorite on long voyages. It stores well and provides a chewy, satisfying base for many dishes. Tonight, it will be cooked into a thick stew with herbs and a touch of garum. As the sun sets, the crew gathers once more. The farro stew is rich and earthy, the herbs lifting its flavor. You eat slowly, enjoying the texture and warmth. A fellow sailor tears his bread and dips it into the stew, eyes closing in contentment. "You know," he says, "my grandmother claimed farro was the grain of the gods, fed to soldiers and sailors alike." He shrugs. Historians still argue whether that is true, but here we are, after the meal. A small pouch of dried figs is passed around. You accept one, its dense sweetness, a fitting close to the day's meals. Such small pleasures remind you of home, of land, of life beyond this wooden world. Night falls with a soft breeze and a sky full of stars. The ship sails steady, the crew relaxed after a good day's work and fine meals. You find a quiet spot near the stern, the taste of farro and figs still on your tongue. The sea whispers below, the stars wheel above, and you feel a rare peace. Life aboard Fortuna's Grace is harsh, but moments like this, a good meal, a calm sea, make it worthwhile. You close your eyes, ready to rest, knowing tomorrow will bring new challenges, new flavors, and perhaps, if the gods are kind, another day of smooth sailing. The next morning, you are awakened not by the call of the watch or the hiss of boiling water, but by shouting. You sit up fast. On the horizon, a sliver of land appears, dark and low in the morning haze. The first port since departure. Not your final destination, just a stopover for fresh water, cargo exchange, and perhaps a bit of local flavor. Everyone is buzzing with energy. After days at sea, the prospect of stepping on solid ground, even briefly, is cause for celebration. The captain calls a quick meeting. You will dock before midday. Stay only a few hours. No wandering off, load, unload, refill stores. Efficiency is everything. As the ship glides toward the small harbor, the smells hit you. Salt, fish, and something else. Spices? Grilled meat? Your stomach grumbles before your feet even touch the dock. Once moored, the crew disperses to their assigned tasks. You join a group headed to refill the water barrels and procure fresh produce. The local market is simple. A dusty square, rows of crates, voices bartering in a jumble of Latin, Greek, and local dialects. Your group secures apples, onions, garlic, leeks, and a few precious sacks of lentils and chickpeas. You marvel at the baskets of fresh herbs, parsley, coriander, even some dill. Diodorus will be thrilled. He has been dreaming about anything green for a week. But what really steals your attention is a grill at the edge of the market, sizzling with skewers of meat, goat, most likely. A vendor fans the smoke toward passersby, drawing sailors like bees to honey. The smell is intoxicating, fat dripping onto coals, meat sizzling, smoke mingling with spice. A few sailors pool coins and buy a handful of skewers. You manage to get one, juicy, smoky, tender. Your teeth sink into the charred exterior and release a burst of garlic and cumin. Historians still argue whether Roman sailors bought cooked street food on short port visits or stuck to ship rations. Based on the way this skewer disappears in 2 bites, you are leaning hard toward the street food theory. One sailor offers a bite of a curious snack, roasted chickpeas dusted with sea salt and fennel. They crunch loudly between your teeth, leaving behind a savory trail of flavor. Another holds up a sticky pastry dripping with honey, probably made with nuts and semolina. The crew calls it honey bread, though it resembles something halfway between cake and glue. Your few hours ashore pass in a blur. You help carry barrels, haggle over garlic bulbs, and laugh more than you have in days. One sailor even finds a sprig of fresh rosemary and wears it behind his ear like a crown. Before long, it is time to board again. The ship is restocked. Amphorae are secured, produce bundled in nets. As you prepare to push off, Diodorus inspects his new bounty like a proud father. Tonight, he says with a grin, we eat like Caesars. Back at sea, the galley comes alive. Diodorus chops onions and leeks, minces garlic, sprinkles coriander. He dices apples into a pot of chickpeas, adds olive oil and vinegar, and lets the mixture simmer until it smells both savory and faintly sweet. The result? a fragrant stew unlike anything you have tasted since boarding. The apples melt into the broth. The chickpeas hold their shape. Each bite is herby, hearty, and gently tart. You eat in near silence, the crew focused completely on their bowls. One sailor jokes, "If Diodorus cooks like this every time we stop, I will start praying for delays." Later, after the meal, the cook brings out a clay jar wrapped in linen. Inside is preserved quince paste, brought aboard weeks ago, but saved for a special night. He slices it into thin, jewel-toned slabs and serves it with hard cheese. The combination is surprising and perfect, sweet and sharp, chewy and crumbly. You chew slowly, unwilling to let it end too soon. As the stars emerge and the night breeze cools the deck, you stretch out full and satisfied. Today's food was more than sustenance. It was a gift, a reminder that even on a Roman cargo ship, far from home, joy can still be found in a bowl of stew or a slice of quince. You smile to yourself, wondering what the next port will bring. Probably more onions, definitely more beans, but maybe, if the gods are kind, another skewer kissed by fire and smoke. The next few days blur into a gentle rhythm: sunrise, labor, meals, sunset, and sleep. But after the rush of the port stop, things feel oddly quieter. The food, however, is anything but boring. Diodorus has returned to his staples, but with a renewed sense of flair. This evening, you walk into the galley and see him hunched over something you have never seen on this ship before. Snails. Not sea snails scraped from the hull. Actual land snails, fat and slow-moving, crawling around in a little wooden crate. You blink. "Are we eating those?" He looks up with a smirk. "You are lucky," he says. "Snails were a delicacy in the city, and they store well if you feed them the right things." He lifts one gently and drops it into a bucket of bran. They clean themselves out this way. Tomorrow, we cook. Historians still argue whether sailors truly ate snails at sea, or if this is one of Diodorus's many eccentric touches. Either way, you are strangely curious. The next day, Diodorus prepares them Roman style, boiled first, then sautéed with a sauce of olive oil, wine, herbs, and a splash of garum. You approach the pot with caution. The aroma is pungent and earthy. You spear a snail, pop it into your mouth, and discover that it tastes not bad. Chewy, but flavorful. The sauce does most of the work. You look over to see Lucius pretending to faint dramatically, then reach for another one. The entire pot is gone in minutes. Later, someone uncorks a fresh amphora of wine brought aboard at the last stop. It is sharp, still young, mixed with seawater, standard practice to keep it from going bad. It loses some of its punch, but still warms your chest. One sailor tells the story of a Roman merchant who once fermented wine in clay jars tied beneath his ship, cooled by the sea. Made him a fortune, he claims. Historians still argue whether that was just marketing, but it is a good story. That night, the meal continues with a dish of carrots and parsnips, stewed in vinegar and honey until they are soft and caramelized. A new favorite. You mop up the syrup with the last of the bread. Diodorus announces there will be baking tomorrow. Baking. On a rocking boat. You watch skeptically the next day as he prepares a basic dough of wheat flour, water, olive oil, and salt. He shapes it into flat rounds, more like dense cakes than loaves, and nestles them inside a little portable clay oven set against a windbreak. The smell is divine. The galley fills with the nutty scent of fresh bread, a smell you thought you had forgotten entirely. The texture is rough, the crust singed, but it is warm and honest. You eat it with a drizzle of olive oil and a few olives from a jar, salty and sharp. Someone opens another jar, pickled vegetables, mostly cabbage and turnip, brightened with mustard seed and dill. They crunch refreshingly against your teeth, cutting the richness of the bread and oil. Pickling was essential on Roman ships. Fresh greens wilt quickly, but preserved vegetables could last weeks or more. The balance of acid and salt keeps them from spoiling and makes even a dull meal sing. You spend the afternoon seated beside a small group of sailors, nibbling on bread and pickles and olives. Someone starts humming a tune. Another claps along. The ship rocks gently under the lull of soft waves. After sundown, Diodorus serves a sweet finale, leftover bread crumbled into milk with honey and a pinch of cinnamon, almost like pudding. It reminds you of childhood, though your mother never made hers on a moving ship. As you scrape the bowl clean, Lucius leans over and whispers, "This is the best thing I have eaten in days." Then, after a pause, "Actually, this is the only sweet thing I have eaten in days." He is not wrong. The meals on Fortuna's Grace are built around survival, beans, grains, salt, vinegar. But when Diodorus pulls a few tricks out of his apron, the line between nourishment and comfort gets delightfully blurred. You fall asleep under the stars, your belly full of warm bread and sweet milk, wondering what strange delicacy might be hiding in a barrel next. You wake with the ship already in motion, sails full, the wind brisk and steady. The air smells clean after a night of light rain, wood, salt, and something faintly citrusy. Diodorus is up early, busy in the galley again. You hear a thwack, 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 and wander over to see him chopping a pile of garlic and onions with practiced speed. He grins. "Today we feast like soldiers." He gestures to a small pile of Mauritum ingredients, garlic, cheese, herbs, oil, and vinegar. Mauritum is a thick herb and cheese spread, popular with both farmers and soldiers in Rome. It is sharp, pungent, and packed with calories. Perfect ship food. Diodorus pounds everything together in a large mortar, turning it into a vivid green paste. The result is intense, garlicky, creamy, and almost too bold for this early hour. But when spread on fresh flatbread, it is impossible to resist. You eat with your eyes watering slightly, mouth tingling. The crew is wide awake after a few bites. One sailor jokes, "This will keep the sea demons away." Historians still argue whether Mauritum was commonly eaten aboard ships, but given how quickly the bowl empties, you are convinced it was not rare. Garlic and vinegar also help ward off illness, Or so the sailors say. By mid-morning, the sea grows glassy calm. With little wind, the ship slows. The captain orders a temporary halt, a rare break in routine. The crew lowers fishing lines again, hoping for luck. You join them, line dangling into the blue depths. The sun is hot, the water blinding. After a long wait, shouts echo. Someone has hooked a large fish. Others follow, and soon a small pile of gleaming catch flops on the deck. Diodorus wastes no time. He cleans the fish, rubs them with olive oil, stuffs their bellies with herbs, and a bit of citrus peel saved from the last port. Wrapped in vine leaves, they go into the embers to roast. The aroma draws the entire crew near. When the fish emerge, skin crisped, flesh tender, you savor every bite. The hint of citrus and smoke transforms it into something far beyond ship rations. A sailor beside you tells a story about a famed Roman general who insisted on fish every day at sea, even when far from shore. Historians still argue whether he was spoiled or brilliant, he says with a wink. Later in the day, as the ship drifts under blazing sun, Diodorus prepares another staple, wheat groats cooked in seawater thinned with fresh water. He stirs in raisins and a splash of vinegar for balance. You eat the resulting porridge slowly. The raisins plump into little bursts of sweetness amid the chewy grains. Not fancy, but nourishing. Nearby, a sailor is cracking open a small amphora. Inside is defrutum boiled down grape must, thick and syrupy. He drizzles a few drops onto his porridge, transforming it. You follow suit. The tangy sweetness lifts the dish, making it feel almost indulgent. Defrutum was used for everything, he explains. Sweetener, sauce, even medicine. My mother swore by it. Historians still argue whether it was a shipboard staple or a luxury item. Either way, it is welcome today. As the afternoon wanes, the wind picks up again. Sails snap. The ship leans. Work resumes. You haul lines, stow gear, and help secure the galley's precious stores against the rolling motion. Evening falls with a cool breeze. Diodorus, ever inventive, decides on a rare treat, Cicer arietinum, or chickpeas, fried crisp in oil. He tosses them with salt and herbs. The resulting snack is irresistible, crunchy, savory, perfect with watered wine. The crew gathers, chatting and laughing. One sailor hums a bawdy tune about chickpeas and love. Another claims Roman poets wrote verses about fried chickpeas. Historians still argue whether that is true, he says with a grin, but I choose to believe it. You eat your share slowly, savoring the satisfying crunch. The ship rocks gently beneath the stars. The wind steady once more. You lean back, hands behind your head, belly full and spirit light. It strikes you again. This ship is a world unto itself. Its meals tell stories of resilience, creativity, and the quiet joys of survival. Bread and beans, fish and fig leaves, fried chickpeas beneath an open sky. Food here is not just fuel. It is a thread binding everyone together through calm seas and tempests alike. As you drift toward sleep, You wonder what Diodorus will conjure next from his humble stores. Something simple, no doubt, but with the right hands. Simplicity tastes like magic. Morning breaks with a stiff breeze and the promise of good sailing. The crew is already up, adjusting sails, checking knots, grumbling about sore backs and sunburns. But your nose leads you elsewhere, to the galley. Diodorus is hunched over a bowl of what looks like crushed nuts and herbs, working with quiet determination. He glances up and gives you a knowing nod. "Nut paste," he says, "for flavor, and to keep you from murdering each other." He mixes the nut paste, made from almonds and pine nuts, with honey and a bit of vinegar. The result is a rich, creamy sauce with a tang that cuts through the sweetness. Today's main course: lentils. Lentils again? You sigh, but you understand. Lentils are a workhorse of Roman cuisine, cheap, filling, shelf-stable, and surprisingly versatile. Diodorus simmers them with onions, herbs, and a scrap of salted pork for depth, then stirs in the nut paste just before serving. And you know what? It works. The sauce lifts the earthy lentils into something complex and hearty. Even Lucius, the loudest lentil complainer on board, devours his bowl in silence. Historians still argue whether Roman ships really carried fancy sauces like this, or if Diodorus is simply too ambitious for his own good. Either way, you are grateful. The day unfolds as usual: chores, sail shifts, sweat. The sea rolls smooth and endless. Around midday, a cry goes up. Dolphins. Everyone scrambles to the rail. Sleek silver shapes dart alongside the ship, racing and diving, as if escorting you. Sailors laugh, clap, and whistle. Someone swears it is a sign of good luck. Another jokes that the dolphins are hungry for garum. It is a brief visit, but the mood remains light for the rest of the day. Diodorus decides to lean into it. For dinner, he prepares a mock fish dish, salt cod rehydrated and gently boiled with bay leaves and leeks, served with a sauce of vinegar, herbs, and, you guessed it, garum. Garum again. Always garum. If there were a patron saint of Roman sailors, it would be a half-empty amphora of garum, chipped and leaking. The fish is mild, the sauce briny and aromatic. It is not the fresh catch of a lucky day, but it is satisfying nonetheless. You eat quietly, listening to the creak of wood, the whisper of canvas, the occasional curse as someone stubs a toe. As night falls, you are asked to help Diodorus with a bit of preservation work. He unwraps a few bundles of dried fruit, figs and dates mostly, and checks them for mold. He then dices the clean ones and mixes them with oil and a pinch of salt, packing them into a jar to be sealed with wax. Preserved fruit might not sound exciting, but on long voyages, it is like gold. The sweetness lifts morale, the chewiness breaks the monotony, and the nutrients, especially from figs, help stave off the creeping menace of scurvy. You steal a slice of dried date when he is not looking. It tastes of sunlight and dust, sticky on your fingers and teeth. Later, In a quiet moment on deck, a sailor named Marius tells you a story about a Roman explorer who swore by figs soaked in seawater to keep his eyesight sharp. Historians still argue whether he was blind or brilliant. He laughs. But he lived to be 90. That night, the crew gathers for a rare late snack. Diodorus has mixed some of the leftover dried fruit with coarse barley and honey, shaping them into small cakes. They are chewy, sweet, and full of crunch. You chew slowly, the wind teasing your hair, the stars dizzying above. Someone begins to tell a ghost story about a ghost ship forever lost whose crew ran out of olive oil and went mad eating nothing but raw grain. You're not sure if you laugh because it is funny or because it hits a little too close to home. Still, the evening ends with full bellies and the kind of laughter that only comes when everything else is quiet. The sea, the ship, the night, they are all background to the real centerpiece of this journey. These humble, creative, oddly beautiful meals. Every ingredient has been pushed to its limit. Every herb has earned its keep. Even the lentils, bless their gritty little souls, are carrying more than their share of the load. As you curl into your makeshift bed, the taste of honey still on your tongue, you wonder how you will ever go back to plain old bread when this voyage ends. The next morning arrives in a blur of mist and motion. The ship groans under a heavy sky, waves slapping against the hull like an impatient child. You stagger out of your corner to find the deck soaked and the mood distinctly sour. Rain, cold, drizzling, endless rain. No fire, no bread, no fresh fish, just damp sails and short tempers. Even Diodorus looks defeated as he pulls a ragged tarp over his cooking area. But Roman sailors do not survive on sunshine and optimism. They survive on hard rations. And today, that means pulse. If lentils are the backbone of Roman food, then pulse is the calcium in its bones. A simple porridge made of emmer wheat or barley, boiled until thick and sturdy. Think gruel, but slightly more Roman. Today's version is barley-based, with a splash of oil and a pinch of dried herbs stirred in just before serving. No meat, no cheese, not even garum, just hot, wet, edible mush. You eat it anyway, spooning it up from a shared bowl, the steam warming your face as the rain continues to fall. Good for the bowels, Diodorus says, a little too cheerfully. Lucius groans. You say that about everything. He is not wrong. Still, hot food is hot food. Historians still argue whether pulse was consumed daily on cargo ships or saved for leaner stretches. But given the weather and the mood, it feels like exactly the kind of meal built for endurance. Later that day, the sea becomes rougher. Supplies must be tied down. The cargo is checked, rechecked, and wedged tighter. You are roped into the effort, slipping across the deck as the ship lurches. There is no lunch, just a handful of olives and a few walnuts from a shared pouch. The olives are brined to the point of bitterness, but you suck them clean anyway. The walnuts are precious, shelled on the spot with a hammer and passed hand to hand. You remember Diodorus once mentioning how some Roman captains ration nuts by the hour, not the day. Too much at once and men get soft, he said. too little, and they riot. Historians still argue whether that is just sailor myth, but you kind of get it now. By evening, the wind finally calms, and Diodorus wastes no time. He hauls out a stash of chickpeas and begins the long process of simmering them into submission. No fancy seasonings this time, just a touch of cumin and a slick of oil. To accompany it, he tosses together a salad of sorts: wilted cabbage leaves, pickled radishes, and a chopped up hard-boiled egg from a small basket you had forgotten existed. How they stayed fresh this long is a mystery. One Diodorus guards fiercely. You sit on a damp barrel, spooning up soft chickpeas with crusty bread, the salad tangy and sharp against your teeth. Someone opens a small bottle of Posca, water mixed with sour wine vinegar, and passes it around. You sip. It is tart, oddly refreshing, and does not taste like anything that should still be drinkable. But it is. Romans drank Posca constantly, especially soldiers and sailors. It was safer than plain water, and easier to carry than wine. Historians still argue whether Posca was a drink of desperation or deliberate choice, but it grows on you, sourness and all. By the time the stars return, the sky has cleared, and so have tempers. You sit near the stern, cup of Posca in hand, listening to the slap of water and the rhythmic creak of the rigging. Lucius joins you, bites into a leftover cabbage leaf, and chews dramatically. "Better than home," he says with a smirk. "My mother boiled everything until it surrendered." You laugh, not just at the joke, but at the strange reality of your life now, measuring your days in olives, counting time in bowls of barley, learning to read the moods of sailors through their chewing speed. Even the rain feels less hostile tonight. Before bed, Diodorus makes a tiny batch of warm milk steeped with poppy seed, a trick he picked up from a physician on another voyage. "For nerves," he says, "and to keep you asleep when the waves hit." It works. You sip slowly, the milk sweet and faintly nutty, your limbs relaxing with each swallow. The ship rocks you like a lullaby, and for the first time in days, you fall asleep without waking to your own hunger. You wake to the smell of citrus, not the sharp tang of a fresh orange, nothing that glamorous. No, this is the fainter, more medicinal aroma of preserved lemon peel simmering in something oily. It lingers on the air like a memory. Diodorus is added again, hunched over a tiny fire, coaxing flavor from scraps and slivers. Today, he is building a stew, not the thick, meat-heavy kind favored in Roman villas, but a sea-worthy version with lentils, preserved lemon, and the last scraps of dried herbs. The lemons, soaked in brine weeks ago, are soft and salty, almost floral. He slices them into thin ribbons and tosses them into the pot with black lentils, garlic, and just a splash of leftover garum for backbone. The result is fragrant, warming, and just unfamiliar enough to jolt your sleepy palate awake. A nearby sailor jokes, "It smells like a rich man's compost," but he eats 3 bowls without complaint. Citrus fruit in Roman times was a luxury, especially in preserved form, and though most cargo ships would not carry piles of fresh produce, They often stashed pickled, dried, or brine versions. Historians still argue whether lemon peel found its way into daily meals or stayed with the officers, but Diodorus believes in sharing the wealth. By midday, the ship is coasting along a quiet stretch of sea. A few bored sailors gather on deck and crack jokes about their favorite meals from home. Roasted dormice come up, stuffed with pork and pine nuts, crispy on the outside. Yes, dormice. Romans loved them, especially in elite circles. There is no chance Diodorus has any hidden in a barrel at least. You really hope not, but the thought alone gets everyone chuckling. Historians still argue whether dormice were ever naval fare, says Lucius with mock seriousness, but I argue they should never be fair, period. Inspired by the chatter, Diodorus digs out one of his show-off dishes, a quick pan of mushrooms and onions sautéed in olive oil with a splash of enogarum, yes, a wine-based version of garum, because apparently regular garum was not dramatic enough. The mushrooms are tender and earthy. The onions almost melt. The sauce coats your tongue with umami and tang, and for a moment you forget the sway of the ship. You eat, leaning against a warm section of wood, sun on your arms, eyes half closed. Someone has started a quiet game of knucklebones. Another sailor is repairing a torn tunic with a fishbone needle. This feels less like surviving and more like living. Dinner that night is humble again, just flatbread dipped in oil and vinegar. But Diodorus has toasted the bread over embers, giving it a smoky edge. He sprinkles it with dried rosemary and salt, paired with a few leftover figs. It tastes like a poor man's banquet. There is something about the rhythm of meals aboard this ship that brings you peace. Everything is simple, yet everything matters. You can feel the layers of history in each bite. How Romans adapted and invented, reusing every crumb, every drop, every trick learned from conquered lands and coastal markets. Diodorus tells you of a Phoenician cook he once worked with who used seaweed as a seasoning. Historians still argue whether seaweed was Roman fare, he says, but I say if it tastes good and you do not die, it counts. That night, he proves that a short walk along the shore during a brief docking produced a small pouch of dried seaweed. He crumbles it over a bowl of warm chickpeas and barley and calls it a delicacy. It tastes like the sea itself, salty, earthy, full of hidden minerals. You chew slowly, eyes drifting across the water, listening to the waves slap the hull in time with your pulse. When the stars appear again, you climb into your usual sleeping nook, head buzzing with lemon and mushrooms and fermented fish sauce. Not exactly comfort food in the modern sense, but comforting somehow. Maybe because it connects you to 1,000 other sailors across 1,000 years, all craving the same thing, enough to eat and enough flavor to make life feel full. You awaken to a peculiar noise, an almost rhythmic thumping, like someone pounding the deck with an oversized spoon. Curious, you stumble toward the sound and find Diodorus hard at work, mortar between his knees, pestle moving in practiced circles. Sesame seeds, he explains between grunts. Today, we make hallux. You blink. Sesame seeds? On a Roman cargo ship? Apparently so. Diodorus had acquired a small sack of them during the last port stop, traded, he says, for an old wool cloak and a few pickled onions. One sailor's trash, he smirks. He continues grinding the seeds with honey, a dash of vinegar, and a sprinkle of salt. The result is a rich, nutty paste, somewhere between a spread and a dip. You taste a fingerful, sweet, earthy, and addictively savory. Alex is not common fare aboard most Roman ships. Historians still argue whether it was an occasional luxury or a regular treat among wealthier sailors. Either way, it is a welcome break from the usual suspects. You spread it thick on flatbread, add a few slivers of preserved lemon, and call it breakfast. The rest of the morning is spent preparing for a sudden shift in weather. The skies darken. The wind picks up. Sailors scurry to secure cargo, tie down loose ropes, and stow fragile supplies. Diodorus, undeterred by the brewing storm, starts on a batch of Panis Nauticus sailor's hardtack, flour, water, and salt kneaded into dense rounds, and baked until nearly inedible. The perfect food for a stormy stretch when fires might go out and fresh meals become impossible. 2 weeks, he says, holding up a finished disc. This will last 2 weeks if it must, or break your teeth in 2 seconds if you're impatient. The sailors laugh, but everyone pockets a few pieces anyway. Lunch is simple. Pulls again, this time with the addition of dried celery leaves and a splash of oil. The storm is close now, and Diodorus prepares a cold dish of lentils with vinegar and garlic, something to eat if the fire cannot be kept lit. You wolf it down with one eye on the sky. The first drops hit, just as the last bowl is cleaned. What follows is a blur. Roaring wind, waves crashing over the deck, shouted orders, the ship tilting at impossible angles. Fires are doused, sails reefed. You cling to the rail drenched and shaking, stomach churning from the motion and fear. No one eats during the worst of it. Hours later, the storm passes. The sea calms, though the ship groans with every new swell. You are exhausted, salt-crusted, starving. Diodorus, ever the magician, revives the galley with a cold spread, olives, hard cheese, dried figs, and slices of Panis Nauticus. You gnaw on the hardtack slowly, alternating bites with figs to soften the edges. Someone uncorks a small flask of spiced wine, Candidum paradoxum, made with honey, pepper, bay leaf, and saffron. It is strong, sweet, and warming, exactly what you need. You sip, savoring the layers of flavor. Historians still argue whether Candidum paradoxum was a practical shipboard drink or a decadent luxury. Tonight, it feels like salvation. With the worst behind you, conversation slowly returns. One sailor recounts a tale of a Roman admiral who survived a 10-day storm on nothing but hardtack and vinegar. Historians still argue whether he embellished, the sailor says with a wink, but the man had all his teeth, so perhaps not. As night falls, the crew gathers in weary camaraderie. Diodorus offers a final gesture, warm milk steeped with lavender and honey, coming and fragrant. You cradle the cup in both hands, breathing in the soft aroma. You sip slowly, feeling the tension melt from your muscles. Around you, sailors murmur, stretch, and drift toward sleep. The storm is gone, but the memory lingers in the bruises, the soaked clothes, the lingering hunger. Yet here you are, still afloat, still fed, still human, aboard this fragile wooden world, where every meal is an act of defiance against the sea. As you close your eyes, the taste of lavender on your tongue, you wonder what storms tomorrow may bring, and what Diodorus might feed you to weather them. You awaken to the gentle slap of water against the hull, a welcome sound after yesterday's chaos. The sea is calm now, the ship steady, the smell of wood smoke, and something sweet draws you toward the galley. Diodorus, of course, is already at work. His eyes twinkle when he sees you approach. Today, we celebrate survival, he says. With spiced porridge, you watch as he stirs a pot of emmer wheat thick and creamy. Into it, he tosses crushed walnuts, a generous spoonful of honey, and a mix of cinnamon and ground pepper. The scent alone feels like a hug. You spoon it up eagerly. The sweetness is comforting. The spice is warming. For a moment, you could be in a Roman villa, not bobbing on the open sea. Historians still argue whether such luxuries were common among sailors, but Diodorus clearly likes to challenge expectations. After breakfast, the crew settles into the work of recovery. Ropes are checked, sails repaired, bruises compared. You help scrub the deck, your muscles still aching from the storm. By midday, appetites return in full force. Diodorus decides to prepare a proper stew, something hearty to rebuild spirits. He hauls out a precious smoked sausage, slicing it into rounds that sizzle in a pan of oil. In go onions, garlic, lentils, and a few wrinkled carrots. The ship's rocking turns the pot into a rhythmic dance, the aroma drawing sailors like moths to flame. You ladle out bowls, the broth rich and smoky, each spoonful a small victory. Lucius slurps noisily beside you. This almost makes the hardtack worth it, he says, grinning. Almost. You laugh, grateful for the warmth in your belly. Later, during a rare lull in duties, a sailor named Publius pulls out a strange-looking bundle, dried mulberries. He passes them around, the chewy, tart berries a welcome surprise. Good for the blood, he claims. My grandmother said so. Historians still argue whether mulberries were shipboard fare or personal indulgence, but no one questions their value today. You chew slowly, savoring the burst of flavor amid the salt and smoke. As afternoon fades, Diodorus gathers the remaining bread. He grates hard cheese, pecorino, sharp and salty, over slices of toasted flatbread, drizzles them with olive oil, and sprinkles dried oregano on top. It is simple, but the contrast of textures and flavors makes it feel like a feast. You sit on a coil of rope, munching contentedly, eyes on the horizon. The sea stretches out in all directions, shimmering under the setting sun. Later, under the stars, Diodorus offers one final comfort, a small pot of stewed prunes with a splash of wine and a stick of cinnamon. He calls it a sailor's dessert, good for digestion, good for morale. The prunes are soft and fragrant, their sweetness deepened by the wine. You eat slowly, savoring each bite, as if it might be your last luxury for days. Nearby, sailors trade stories of famous Roman captains who survived shipwrecks and storms with little more than prunes and prayers. Historians still argue whether the prunes helped, one quips, but prayers surely did. As the ship rocks gently, you lie back and gaze at the stars, belly full, spirit restored. It strikes you how food here is more than sustenance. It is memory, comfort, and connection. Each dish tells a story of resilience, each flavor a bridge between worlds, between land and sea, between past and present, between survival and joy. And with that thought, you drift into sleep, the taste of cinnamon and wine lingering on your tongue. You are dreaming of roasted meat when a strange sound jolts you awake, sharp, rhythmic, and coming from the edge of the galley. It is Diodorus once again, but this time he is using a long-handled grater to shave dried botarga over a bowl of warm barley. You blink. Fish eggs? For breakfast? He grins. If you are still alive, you get the best today. Botarga, salted, pressed, and dried mullet roe is a delicacy known across the Roman world. Some say it came from Egypt. Others point to Carthaginian origins. Historians still argue whether it was a standard part of naval provisioning or reserved for coastal elites. But Diodorus has a small stash, wrapped in cloth, brought aboard like a pirate's treasure. He slices thin curls of it over barley and olive oil, the salt and umami soaking into every grain. You take a bite. It is rich, briny, and faintly funky in the best way, like anchovies meeting Parmesan. As you eat, the crew discusses the upcoming stretch of the journey, several days of open sea with no chance to resupply. Spirits are high, thanks in no small part to Diodorus' culinary magic. Lunch is a cold salad made from lentils, diced salted radish, bits of smoked fish, and vinegar. It is sharp, hearty, and keeps well in the heat. A sailor passes around a handful of dried chickpeas roasted with cumin and salt, a crunchy snack you did not expect to love, but do. Even Lucius, who usually mocks anything fancy, admits he would pay for more. Then comes the surprise. Diodorus opens a sealed jar, carefully revealing pickled cabbage, Roman sauerkraut. The smell is sharp enough to make several sailors recoil, but once it is served with a slice of grilled bread and a bit of sausage, no one complains. Fermentation keeps us alive, Diodorus says. Also, it keeps Lucius from talking too much with his mouth full. The cabbage is crunchy, sour, and oddly refreshing after so much oil and fish. Pickled vegetables were a staple on long voyages. They prevented scurvy before anyone knew what scurvy was, and they added that acidic brightness meals desperately need. Historians still argue whether cabbage or turnips were more common on Roman ships. But what matters now is that your tongue tingles and your stomach feels good. As the day wears on, the sea gets choppier, the air heavier, rain threatens, but holds off. Dinner is a one-pot miracle, onions caramelized down to sweetness, chickpeas, garlic, vinegar, and a few broken bits of flatbread to thicken the stew. A sprig of thyme floats on top like a crown. You eat with a wooden spoon, hunched under an awning as the wind picks up. The flavors are deep and soothing. Someone passes a flask of spiced vinegar, used both as seasoning and as a drink in lean times. You take a sip. It stings, then warms, like Roman Gatorade. One sailor jokes. Diodorus finishes the night with another of his calming teas, this time made with mint and a few crushed coriander seeds. It is floral, slightly sweet, and clears your senses as the ship sways. One of the younger sailors asks about Roman kitchens on land. Diodorus paints a picture of smoky hearths, copper pots, and kitchens ruled by cooks who were half chef, half sorcerer. He describes clay ovens, communal meals, even a recipe for flaming cheese involving honey and vinegar that made one patrician scream. Historians still argue whether that scream was joy or terror, he says with a wink. The crew laughs. Even Lucius. You fall asleep that night feeling strangely proud, like you are part of a secret society of survivors and flavor chasers. On this wooden ark, in the middle of history, food is not just fuel. It is the ritual that reminds everyone who they are. And if the botarga does not kill you, it might just make you stronger. You wake to the rattle of amphory shifting below deck and the faint scent of smoke, wood smoke, but also something richer, almost sweet. By the time you get to the galley, Diodorus is halfway through roasting dates stuffed with pine nuts over a tiny flame. I had to use the last of the olive oil for this, he warns. So if anyone complains, I will toss them overboard. The dates blister gently, their sugars bubbling, the pine nuts toasting inside. You take one, careful, it burns your fingers, then your tongue, then your soul. Sweet, nutty, faintly bitter from the char. You wonder how something so decadent exists out here. Stuffed dates, you learn, were popular at Roman banquets. Apicius himself, Rome's Julia child, if she preferred flamingo tongues, recommended them with black pepper. Historians still argue whether this was a shipboard treat or pure decadence, but Diodorus insists. Even sailors deserve dessert. The ship is quieter today, the water calmer. Some sailors mend sandals, others play knucklebones near the bow. You help sort supplies, tallying what remains, chickpeas, dried herbs, a few heads of garlic, some spoiled onions you immediately toss overboard. Lunch is an old favorite. Maridum, a garlicky cheese spread mashed with herbs, vinegar, and olive oil, though you are scraping the last of that from the bottom of a jar. It is pungent, sharp, creamy, and deeply Roman. Spread over hard bread, it revives you better than any wine. You remember the first time you tasted it, a punch of garlic, a slap to the senses. And now, weeks in, you crave that intensity. Diodorus sees your expression and laughs. It is like love. First it hurts, then you cannot live without it. Later, the wind dies down and the sails droop. The ship slows. Everyone becomes sluggish. Heat and stillness always dull the senses. In this lull, Diodorus prepares a cold soup, cucumber, vinegar, crushed garlic, and mint, all thinned with water, a precursor to gazpacho, though no one calls it that. You sip it like a drink, cool, sharp, surprisingly refreshing. That, Lucius says, is the only reason I have not flung myself into the sea today.
Afternoon stretches long. A few sailors lounge in hammocks. One of them sings softly, a tune about a dolphin saving a sailor from a sinking trireme. Historians still argue whether it is based on a real event or wishful thinking, but the song has a rhythm that lulls you like the tide. For dinner, Diodorus returns to something simple: boiled lentils with bits of garum and chopped dried apricots stirred in. Sweet and salty, odd but comforting. You chew slowly, knowing the rations are running thin. A few more days, perhaps, maybe less. Still, no one complains. Not tonight. One sailor brings out his last preserved figure. He splits it 3 ways. For luck, he says. Another uncorks a jar of pickled eggs, and you take half of one, bracing for the sour pop. It delivers. That night, there is no fire, just starlight. The galley cools and darkens. Diodorus serves the final act of the day, a cup of warm water with thyme and a sliver of orange peel dropped in. Where he got the orange peel, you dare not ask. You sip. It is barely flavored, but the hint of citrus makes you remember land. Markets, trees, shade. Sleep comes easily. And as you drift off, you realize how strange it is to feel more alive than ever in this fragile, leaking, creaking tub of wood and tar and garlic breath. But somehow, you do. The ship creaks awake beneath you, the sea a silver sheet in the dawn. Supplies are low, everyone knows it. Diodorus knows it best. When you reach the galley, he is staring at the inventory with the same grim determination a general might give a battered map. He looks up and grins anyway. It will be a creative day. Breakfast is Spartan. Barley soaked overnight in seawater and rinsed, then simmered with the last of the dried celery leaves and a scant drizzle of vinegar. Barely enough to call it a meal, but it fills the void. You chew and listen to the sounds of the waking ship, ropes tightening, a bucket splashing, someone swearing softly about a missing sandal. Even here, life pushes forward. Later that morning, the crew catches a break, literally. A small haul of sardines is netted over the side. Tiny, glittering bodies wriggling in the sun. There is no salt left to cure them properly, so Diodorus works fast. He cleans them, lines them in a pan, layers them with oil and crushed herbs, then lets the sun and warmth begin a quick cure. By midday, they are edible, briny, soft, intensely fishy. You eat them greedily on broken flatbread. The sea provides, Diodorus says. Historians still argue whether Roman sailors preferred fresh or preserved fish aboard ship, but no one here is debating today. The sardines spark a surge of energy. Repairs are made, sails trimmed. The mood lifts slightly. Even Lucius cracks a smile through a mouthful of fish. For lunch, Diodorus stretches the last of the chickpeas into a mash, mixed with garlic, a splash of garum, and olive oil scraped from the bottom of the amphora. A proto-hummus, if you squint. It is earthy and satisfying, especially when eaten with fingers and a laugh. You clean your bowl, fingers oily and happy. Afternoon brings a surprise. A barrel of apples, hidden beneath coils of rope, is discovered still half full. The fruit is soft but edible. Diodorus slices them thin, sots them with the last of the honey and a pinch of pepper. Warm, caramelized apples with black pepper. A dish Apicius himself might have written about. Historians still argue whether black pepper was too valuable for common sailors, but here, at the edge of rationing, it feels like a tiny rebellion against blandness. The ship is quieter as evening falls. Everyone knows this stretch will test them. Dinner is a stew in the loosest sense. Water, garlic, a handful of barley, and the last bits of dried fish. Thin, salty, but hot and welcome. You sip slowly, the warmth spreading through tired limbs. Later, Diodorus passes around a small flask, dregs of spiced wine mixed with seawater and a few bruised herbs. For the throat, he claims. It burns going down but leaves a comforting heat in its wake. You sit with the crew under stars so bright they seem to hum. Someone tells a story of a Roman merchant ship that vanished for 3 months and returned with a hold full of emeralds, and a cook who claimed the crew survived on lichen and prayer. Historians still argue whether any of that was true, the sailor finishes, but I will take my chances with sardines and apples. You agree. Later, Diodorus serves the last act of the day, warm water steeped with bay leaf and a shred of dried fig skin. Barely flavored, but fragrant enough to soothe. You sip it slowly, eyes heavy. Tomorrow, the supplies will run thinner still, but tonight there is enough. Enough warmth, enough flavor, enough shared laughter to remind you why this mad floating life is worth enduring. And as you drift asleep, the scent of bay and figs still in your nose, you know this. Roman sailors may have braved endless seas and howling storms, but they never, ever gave up on good food. The dawn breaks pale and thin. You wake with a parched mouth and a stomach that reminds you insistently of yesterday's dwindling meals. Around you, the crew stirs slowly, moving like old men despite their youth. Supplies are now nearly gone. You find Diodorus in the galley, expression unreadable. He has laid out the remnants before him. A few garlic cloves, the last barley grains, a heel of hardened bread, 1 limp apple, and a single precious amphora, still a quarter full of garum. Today, he says softly, we practice gratitude. Breakfast is little more than barley water, grains boiled until they surrender to the broth. Diodorus adds a splash of garum for depth. It tastes of the sea, salt, and umami, a drinkable memory of feasts past. You sip it slowly, as though it might vanish if rushed. The ship moves lazily through calm water, the sun high and relentless. Duties are light, conversations quieter. Hunger gnaws at the edges of everyone's patience, but camaraderie holds strong. At midday, Diodorus produces a miracle. Somehow, he has coaxed the last apple into something new, thin slices simmered in water with garlic and garum, the result a savory sweet compote that spreads easily on stale bread. You chew with reverence. The apple tastes brighter than it should, a trick of memory and hunger. Historians still argue whether Roman sailors truly valued fruit aboard ship, Diodorus muses, but I have never met one who would refuse it. Laughter bubbles weakly among the crew. Even now, humor floats to the surface. By afternoon, a faint breeze stirs, the ship picks up speed, and hope flickers anew. Landfall might come tomorrow or the day after. The mood lifts slightly. Dinner is symbolic more than filling. Diodorus stews the last garlic cloves with water and garum, then crumbles hard bread into the pot. The result is a rustic garlic soup, thin but fragrant. As you sip, you remember the grand meals of earlier weeks, the stuffed dates, the sizzling sausages, the minty cool soup. Now, with little left, even this humble broth feels like a gift. Later, Diodorus surprises everyone one last time. From beneath his cloak, he retrieves a tiny wax seal jar, preserved rose petals and honey. A rare indulgence he had saved for the darkest moment. He dabs a bit onto each sailor's hand, sticky, floral, transcendent. You lick yours slowly, savoring every nuance. It tastes of lost gardens, distant lands, the memory of life beyond this ship. Historians still argue whether such indulgences had a place aboard cargo vessels, Diodorus says, voice gentle, but I say they do. They remind us we are more than hunger. Night falls softly. The sea hums beneath you, the stars a silent choir overhead. Diodorus prepares a final brew. Bay leaf, a shred of old fig skin, a single preserved rose petal floated atop the water. The fragrance alone is enough to comfort you. As you sip in silence, surrounded by weary comrades, a deep calm settles in. The ship creaks onward through darkness, and so do you. Now let the weight of the day slip from your shoulders. Feel the wooden planks beneath you soften with each breath. The sea beyond this fragile hull rocks you in a slow, steady rhythm like the heartbeat of an ancient world. Listen, faint creaks, the whisper of rope, the sigh of a tired sailor. Let your mind drift back through these past weeks, the tang of garum on warm barley, the sweetness of honey-soaked dates, the sharp bite of garlic and mint. Each meal a memory, each flavor a tether to life amid the vast, indifferent sea. Remember the faces of your fellow sailors, their laughter, their weariness, their quiet gratitude for each morsel. On this ship of endless blue horizons, food was more than sustenance, it was hope. It was humanity. Now the galley is dark. Diodorus has banked the coals. The last cup of rose-scented brew rests in your hands, its warmth seeping into your skin. Sip it slowly, letting the gentle floral notes unfurl like petals in your mind. Breathe deeply. The night is vast, but you are safe within this floating world. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let the gentle rock of the ship lull you deeper, deeper still. You are nourished. You are whole. And tomorrow, when the sails catch the dawn wind, you will wake to another day, another chance to taste life in all its flavors. For now, rest.